Is Lucifer the god of the Freemasons? Yes. To join Freemasonry, you have to be invited. You can't just join it. And the general sort of understanding is that this is going to be very good for business, for social interaction, for your career.
So they allow you to worship like Jehovah or Yahweh?
You can worship any god you want, but that's the only qualification. Because they're going to convert whoever they are over to worshiping the great architect of the universe, Hell, Satan. AI has the same destination whether you're doing it for good or evil. So it's like good magic and black magic.
Do these people know that they're advancing a system that has been prophesied as having to happen for the rise of the Antichrist, or do they not?
The fallen angels continue to tell their offspring, their descendants of their offspring, that they can still win.
Is there a hierarchy for these things like Illuminati, Freemasons?
The fairy tale concept goes back many years for when they're ready to reveal things, that we would accept that more easily, and they can tell us that they told us, we just didn't understand. This fairy tale concept, both Tolkien and Lewis were talking about, is they consider the Bible a fairy tale because they both said so. I'll show you their doctrines and the fruits of their works, and if they ever became Christian, they never recanted their writings. Many Freemasons are witches. Why? Because they're adepts, and they are leading the setting up of new towns. They're there to set up their legal claim to the new continent. When Moses dies, we have Satan showing up to claim his body. That's because he is initiated at Heliopolis. People confuse and conflate wrath and tribulation.
You said you don't want to live through it.
No.
Do you think you will?
Probably.
People have to get over the fear of death in all connotations, because if you know what is really going to happen, you won't be fearful. Hey, before you get into this is a dense and meaty episode. We have Gary Wayne back in town with us, and we talked a lot about a lot of different things. We covered a bit of the ancient roots of Freemasonry, some secret societies, what happens in those organizations. And we spent a big chunk of time talking about end time prophecy, which personally I was very fascinated with. And shocker, it's all in the Bible, and it's very easy to read and understand. So you're going to like this one, but it is dense. And so prepare yourself. There were a couple moments where we got to come up for air and talk about something silly like Lord of the Rings. And then we go back into the end times stuff, and it's awesome. It will leave you inspired, maybe a little bit afraid, but also inspired. Enjoy.
Everyone wants to get to the high places, but if you want to go high, you first have to go deep.
What's up? Welcome back to the Deep End. What's up, Jake?
What up?
What were you looking at?
I was just double checking your camera.
I know. I like how you smoothed it back into place right before you had to respond.
Yeah.
You are a professional.
I try to do my job well, bro.
You're hardcore, man.
Thank you.
You're so hardcore. Hey, we're
Thank
here
you.
with Gary Wayne, the Gary of Wayne from Canada. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're always welcome. You can live here if you want.
Well, that's a good place to live.
We've got a place for you. You just stay all the time, answer all my questions. If you're not familiar with Gary Wayne, he is a Christian conspiracist. Whoa, contrarian.
Conspiracist.
Would
Wow.
you be a conspiracist too?
Well, it'd have to be with the name of the book.
We should talk about the difference between conspiracy theories and delayed truth. We'll talk about that in a minute. He wrote the two books, The Genesis 6 Conspiracy, which is fascinating. You should pick up a copy of this book and read it. And then Genesis 6 Conspiracy Part 2, which is more about, it's got prophetic elements about how tracing this and knowing this prepares us for the end times. Which book was your favorite to write?
They're both good, but I really like...
Oh, Gary, let's pull your mic a little bit closer. Sorry. Keep going. Keep going. You're good. Perfect.
He doesn't like that mic in his face.
I don't think he does. He likes it far away.
I do.
So you were telling us your favorite.
Yeah, I think I like both, but I think my favorite is book 2. In book 1, I had different goal for what I wanted to do, but book 2 really played to things that I had already researched on and sort of alluded to. But the nature of the book, where I was trying to let historians and organizations and religions speak in their own words, I tended to use those quotes just to verify the veracity of what they had said. But in book 2, because it's directly for Christians and to go deeper into the Bible, then I could get into some of those other things that I was kind of alluding to. So I go deeper into etymology, I go deeper into word meanings in the Hebrew and the Greek, and I go deeper into prophecy. And then I also go so deep in book 2 in terms of trying to understand the Old Testament and how the Bible is written that it really, is my favorite because it gave me an opportunity to write about things that I thought I probably wouldn't write about. And I said I would never write a sequel. And that's because I didn't understand how to write it. And I didn't want to be redundant. And I had other things that I wanted to do versus what the audience was saying that they wanted. And so I finally listened and I stopped the book I was writing. And then I learned how to write book 3 through book 2.
Which will be ready?
Probably a couple, 3 years with the calendar looking.
A couple, 3 years, like 9 years.
It's not. I will guarantee it's shorter than book 2 and shorter than book 1.
It's like 800 pages.
Maybe not that much shorter because it's going to be loaded with information.
Do you want me to proof it for you? If you send it to me early,
I could do that. Yeah.
Okay. I will take that mantle. I will take that for you. I can't wait to read book 3. You were telling me a little bit about it. We drove to Chipotle to eat food, and I wish I would have recorded the whole thing.
Whoops.
Because I had had a question, and then that question turned into like my whole life being rethought because everyone's lied to me. So back to the conspiracy thing.
Oh no.
Christians have a bad name sometimes for being conspiracy theorists.
Yeah.
But then you find out that they were right. Like 3 years after the fact. I don't know if you've ever talked about this, but like the development of conspiracy as a word and how it's basically come in and anything that is truth, they're putting it in movies so that we don't look at it. Like, how far should we go? Because I could find myself going crazy if I go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, they've changed the meaning of conspiracy to mean something that it wasn't really designed to convey. But that's not unusual in today because they were able to coin a phrase to seed more information and utilize even what was true for the misinformation. And so it kind of works to their benefit to do it, but it's starting to flip on that because as you sort of, I think we're alluding to in recent years, all the things that everybody said was conspiracy is turning out to be true. So that opens the door to how much are they lying to us about. And my message to people is you have no idea how much they're hiding from you and trying to mislead you with. And until you understand their language and how they operate, they've got you right where they want you. And it's kind of like being a mushroom, so to speak. And so, and in a way that they keep you pacified, and not curious. And you've been prepared to do that all of your life. So if you're wanting to understand how the world works, then you're going to probably do it in phases, and it's going to be difficult. It's eye-opening once you recognize the patterns of what's going on. But it's better to know than not to know. And it's better to make a choice based on informed information than not to make a choice, because no choice is still a choice.
Yep. When you say they, you're referring primarily to the families and the royals that is kind of precede government that we would think about today.
Yeah, it's the invisible ones that work behind the scenes, literally invisible as the spiritual realm in the hierarchy, who the visible ones answer to. And that's the external hierarchy that Alice Bailey is talking about and when she wrote for 2025, you're going to have the externalization of the hierarchy. So we're going to see the invisible ones become more visible as we get closer to the days of Noah, so to speak. And that we'll find out how they're working with the visible ones, but they're still going to do it in a way that it's going to confuse you. So it's why you want to be able to discern things, and that there are invisible ones, as they like to talk about, within the visible ones, and they've become more invisible, more from about the 12th to 13th century on, just as you have the Council of 33 families who call themselves the invisible ones, right? So they remain more behind the scenes than front and center. So when we're looking at this hierarchy of who runs things, it's the secret societies, but the secret societies is an organizational structure that comes from the royales. And when I use the word royale, I'm talking about a word that goes back in its etymology through French king to regalis and regal out of Latin for ruler and reg for ruler in Indo-Aryan, the language of the giants, because that language of the giants infiltrates our languages even into this day. And El, as in Al, is a transliteration of El for an angel or a god. So it's the royales who set up all of the organizational structures around the world. The secret societies is probably the largest one as it interconnects with other types of organizations, but it's the easiest way to understand how it works with the royales at the top, beginning with the 13 families in the West, not around the world, 13 families in the West. There's probably another 13 families around the world. And the 33 families underneath and the Committee of 300 Families, with the Rosicrucians as that intersection between the purebloods and the rising lower bloodlines that come up through Freemasonry, Illuminati, into the Rosicrucians bottom half as part of that thalamic tree trunk.
Is there a hierarchy for these things like Illuminati, Freemasons, et
Yeah,
cetera?
I gave it to you, but I'll start from the bottom. Freemasonry at the bottom, Illuminati, Rosicrucian, Committee of 300 Families, Council of 33 Families, 13 families. Intersects into, I'm not sure how many families out of the 13 that are part of the worldwide one, but they are well represented.
Are those 13 families traceable back to the Nephilim?
Yes. They keep their genealogies that go back into prehistory. They'll go back twofold, one to a Nephilim or a Rephaim patriarch or matriarch, and to one of the celestial mafia godfathers. So one of the fallen angels. And so they keep these genealogies forever. I mean, right from the beginning, they've kept them. So when Prince Charles, before he became King Charles III, he said he was descended from Vlad the Impaler, which is who Dracula is based on, the vampire movies. And Dracula means son of a dragon with the A on the end. And it's rooted in Draconta and Dracont, meaning a watcher in Greek. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, because Vlad the Impaler is your typical noble Celt, your noble giant. He's red-haired. He's hazel-eyed, pale-skinned, sensitive to light, educated at the mystery school in Austria, in Vienna. And he's of the bloodlines. And he takes his bloodlines back to a tribe produced by Hercules, the Egrity, and another branch as well, because there's an ennobling that goes on. So there's two patriarchal angels involved there. But understanding they're part, at least in part, of the credit gens that we talked about in another show. It's coming from Zeus as the credit gens, as one of those genses. There's another angel that they would take in their belief system. I don't have a lot of documentation on this, so I do want to be careful with it. I have some, but it tends to go back to Tamiel, which we might know as Kezidiah in the book of Enoch. And so those would be the two. So if that last one isn't 100% true, I'm told it's ennobled, but it's hard to get verification on some of these things.
What was that fallen angel responsible for doing?
Well, it was one of the top 7 in the book of Enoch, right?
Okay.
So you would look at that as one of the top Satans. So in the book of Enoch, you have Satan, Hasatan, and then Satans. So Azazel is one of them, but Azazel would be sort of the chief of the Satans. So very powerful, would be represented today as one of the 7 wandering stars, 7 days of the week, and the main, the famous 7, around the world, just with different vernacular names.
Got it. I want to talk about, bye, Heather.
Bye.
See ya. For those watching, Heather just left the room.
Yeah.
Your wife doesn't care anymore.
Very like non-conspicuous too. Yeah, that was really, really smooth.
Okay, back to genius stuff. With the 7 fallen angels, am I mistaken in thinking that they taught different things to mankind, or did
They did all different arts and crafts. So
they each had like a lane?
pardon me?
They may have like a lane that they.
Yes, they do. They did, but the 6 didn't provide anywhere near what 1 did, and that would be Azazel. So, and Azazel in the book of Enoch is said to have provided so many different things, and also attribute, in my opinion, what Shemyaza is accounted for as well, because Shemyaza isn't like the name Azazel. It isn't like, Uriel. It doesn't end in El, and it looks like a transliteration or corruption downstream in the book of Enoch. But you can take it back to some etymological language. So, for example, Shemyaza, you can take that back to Shem, as in men of renown, Shem, and famous or infamous, and also Shemaim or Shema in the singular for heavens. So Shemaim would be heavenly ones. And Azza is a Zen word and an Arabic word for an angelic being, and Azza is part of Azazel. So if you have the front half as a heavenly one and the back half of Azazel, you basically have the compounded word there as well. So Azazel is the scapegoat for the antediluvian sins because he taught the most, and also was the destroyer god that taught all the arts and crafts of war and all the technology that would go with it, and was the leader of the Watchers, and is the one who was sent to the abyss pit prison in the book of Enoch as well. So when I look at all the other ones, are they kind of important, but they're kind of minuscule to the level of what Azazel had done. And it may account for why there's a second goat that is sacrificed on the Day of Atonement. The first is for the sins of Israel, and the second is for a scapegoat for unknown sins sent to the wilderness. And that's the Hebrew word in the Hebrew as not scapegoat or, kind of anything to do with a goat. It's Azazel, except that Azazel you can also take back in its compounded words from Az and Azaz back to goat as well.
Got it. Can you talk to us about who you've mentioned, Alice Bailey?
Yeah.
Can we get some history on him? I know who the name is, but I'm not super familiar with what he did.
Yeah, it's Alice.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. And she was a very famous Gnostic, probably, I would say, let's say a generation ago. And she was very much involved with the Gnostic movement, the New Age movement, very much involved with getting printed products and Lucis Trust and with the globalist movement. So she's a very, very important individual that comes out of Gnosticism and Theosophy that still is considered on the occult side one of those go-to people that is talking about the polytheist side of the end time.
Who was she responsible for creating any of the Freemasonry predated her?
Yes.
So did she create anything, or how did she figure this out?
She'd be an adept.
Okay.
Right.
Got it. One sec. I'm going to look up her name real fast. Who was the person who was like the founder of the Luciferian Church? That's a different person, correct?
How's it spelled?
I'm looking it up.
Alicebeailey. Now, anything that's sort of associated with her from a Christian perspective would be a Luciferian church, but she would be more understood as a Theosophist or a Gnostic.
Not good.
Not good.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Luciferian, how does Luciferian fit into these secret societies, or is it totally separate?
Well, Luciferians are almost a cult within the real religion. So they're almost like misinformation that's out there. They're low level for the most part. So is Lucifer the god of the Freemasons? Yes. But not how we see these low-level sort of churches at. And it doesn't mean that they don't have some bloodlines or maybe some organizational relationship. But understand the Gnostic religion is polytheism, with Satan as being the chief god. And it's a highly structured professional organization and very, very secretive. So there's just so many things that you want to be careful with, sort of the caricatures that come with these satanic, visible type of churches. It's more, I think, for misinformation.
Got it. As it pertains to Freemasonry, I have a lot of either questions that come in about Freemasonry. I have a couple of friends who are actually just in the organization because they think it's
self-help,
interesting and self-help. Yeah. And one of my friends got into Freemasonry for like protection because he's ex-military. What is Freemasonry? Because it's hard to figure out what it is.
Yeah, it's first level on the thelemic trunk.
What's that?
The thelemic trunk is a name. It comes from a group of Rosicrucian writers as they describe their organizational structure. And it's a Greek word that comes out of the Bible for, you'll see it translated, it comes from Greek thelem, meaning God's will. Mm-hmm. So they use that, but then they mistranslate it a couple of times where it's going to be in reference to sexual improprieties and things like that. Mm. And that's sort of to reflect their free will of what they do as they corrupt and usurp everything they can from the Bible. So when they look at the term as above, so below, they have a different meaning than above as being our heaven with God and where we are on earth. Their heaven is in Hades or Sheol, where their gods reside, right? So this thelemic tree, just like the genealogical tree is a thelemic tree for the genealogies, has its roots that go down into the earth, into another dimension, because those locations are located through portals in their belief system. And so they get their genealogical roots from the celestial mafia godfathers that we talked about earlier, the fallen angels, the gods, and they receive their authority with this other tree. So you can imagine the genealogical thelemic tree as like an ash tree, an oak tree, or an elm tree, and preferably the elm tree, which is very important in the Gnostic religion. Won't go into the history, but those are like umbrella trees, right? Oak trees can maybe grow a little bit more straight up, but still that sort of concept, just like oak was the holy tree of the Druids. So they'll use them interchangeably within the different cultures. And you also have this cedar of Lebanon that the organizational structure is based on. So that is this giant tree that's used in Amos 2 for the description of the Amorites to being like the cedars of Lebanon as giants. It's a simile. They weren't that big because these trees were 100 feet tall and 50 feet around. But again, it gives you the 2-to-1 height to width ratio for the stout aspect. When you're looking at biblical references like Og's bed, for example, 9 and 4 cubits, is that 2-to-1 stout sort of ratio and description of the giants. So what's interesting about this tree as well is that the branches come down. So this is the thelemic tree for the secret society organizational trunk structure. And then those trunk organizations are on the trunk. And then you have all these branches that intersect around the tree. And that has a hierarchy within all of the branches. So you have a major branch organization that intersects into the thelemic tree. And so, for example, you would have, just to do some quick examples, the Skull and Bones initiatory organization on the Ivy League colleges in the U.S. is an Illuminati organization. And they have the emblem of the Illuminati, and they have the Templars' skull and bones, right? Mm-hmm. And So that would be one of those organizations that would intersect into the trunk, as an example. So the Davos crew, World Bank is another organization, IMF is another one, World Trade Organization, those types of organizations would enter into the Committee of 300 trunk section. And so the more powerful and influential is the higher they intersect is branching out from that trunk. And so you can imagine these branches all the way around with all these different organizations going right around the tree. Now you have a framework to understand how big their organization would be. If you use a pyramid, which you might be able to use within one organization, you run out of room to put more organizations into in a proper hierarchical structure.
Got it. My question whenever this stuff comes up is there's got to be, I'm trying to look for logical explanations for how they've gotten so powerful. Are there people in these organizations who have been alive for like 700 years? You always hear the story is like, if you live long enough, you can take over a lot, but how did they do this?
I won't dismiss that there might be some that live to be longer ages, but it's unlikely. But they do try and advance the occult sciences to do these kinds of things. So, but we know life was limited to 120 years after the creation of the giants in Genesis 6:3, and we see that bear out in the generations after the flood. So they struggle with trying to create that longer life as well. But what they did do was they usurped through their size. And so if the giants were larger than post-Diluvian giants, and the largest giant that I know of is Orontes, that the river is named after, and Gilgamesh. This isn't biblical. They'd be 19 feet tall because they're 11 cubits tall, both of them. And Og being 9 cubits, fitting into a 9-cubit long bed, which would be 15 to 16 feet. So say 14 to 15 feet at the tallest level. Antediluvian giants were thought to be a lot bigger. Okay, so they had the ability both before and after the flood to dominate society because of their sheer size and their ability to work together. Some people say that's the hive mind. That's the occult belief system, that they had this telepathy that they had at one time that they would like to regain. And so you see things like the Neuralink being kind of developed and things like that to do so. And so when we look at what they did with that power is they took over the first two classes both before and after the flood. So when you look at the 4-class system, we also know that as the feudal system in Europe. It's the same class system. It is the same system all over the world. So if you look at First Nations in North America, Central America, and South America, they have the same class system even to this day. So bloodlines for the chiefs, bloodlines for the priests. And then you have the two lower classes. The two lower classes consist of the third level of tailors, bakers, blacksmiths, small entrepreneurship, and the slave class and the fourth class or the working class or the sacrifice class, depending on what part of history that you're dealing with here. And the top two classes control the royal bloodlines and the larger family, because it's all one larger family, just different branches as it comes down and gets bigger over the years. And so they controlled the kingships. They controlled all of the priests in the religions. They controlled all of the education and only educated themselves. They controlled all the leaders as the officers and generals, commanders of the army. The humans would populate the sacrificial class of the pawns, if you were the foot soldiers, right? They weren't the knights and the charioteers and things like that. And they also populated the oligarch class. So they controlled all the big business. And so they were able to hold that system for millennia and to keep people uneducated and unable to organize properly and to understand what was going on. And this is where the word elite comes from. I would say Elim. And although you can't get the meaning of that out of the Bible, you actually have one of the mountains during the Exodus named Elim. It just has a different meaning than what I am. So, I mean, they consider themselves superior as the definition of elite through genealogy, through education, through a privileged class. So I prefer Elim over Elite, as they would probably do. And again, fits with my sort of scenario of giants with an IM plural.
Yeah.
And ites for the hybrids and the humans. So when we look at that class system that they were able to have, you see things in perfection on how to control. So the best example for the West to understand is the system in Great Britain. And that system has been in place for a very long period of time. And since its rise, 99% of the land was owned by 1% of the population, by the royals. And so when we talk about the 1%, that's the true 1% that control everything and have all of the wealth. And because they controlled that until recently in terms of education and a rising middle class, they were able to control the world and keep us blind and knowing. And they even controlled things through our own churches to control us. And we see that as it was done in the past. First, it was, well, you couldn't have the Bible in English if you were in England. It had to be in Latin, or if you're in France, it had to be in Latin. And then you had the breaking away of the Protestant churches and starting to get some copies in English. And whatever the motivations, whatever you want, it was a good thing because now we're starting to have that access to it. But now they switch over to, at this sort of point in time, and probably even before, you're not taught to read the Bible that you now have in English. Just read the verses we tell you to read and don't ask any difficult questions. And until the last 100 years, most people couldn't read anyways. So it was only for the elite or the Elim in the vernacular language was for the elite again. So it's a system that they've dominated. And that's why they have a war against the middle class today. They want to reassert that they introduced before the flood originally and then reintroduced again after the flood.
Do you have thoughts on Elon?
Oh boy.
Yeah, a lot of thoughts, but
I mean, is he like perpetuating this race to the end times?
I think we are a product of the fruit that we bear. So, and I understand this race for technology, but AI has the same destination whether you're doing it for good or evil. So it's the same agenda. So it's the white hat, black hat understanding in polytheism. So it's like good magic and black magic. It's like good giants and evil giants. It's like good kings and evil kings, good witches and evil witches. It's a standard dogma. And it's designed just as our politics are when you get the established parties versus populism, which is why they don't like populism because it's more difficult to control. It's done to create a pulls apart positioning and cattle herd you into the open arms of where they want you to go to, into their open arms of destruction.
This is when we talk about the war against the middle class, AI comes to mind because it seems to be one of the surest paths to universal basic income and job reduction. So sometimes I wonder if these guys are aware that they're moving us or if they're just kind of playing a part.
One of the problems with technology is advancing is you can't control it. You can't control necessarily who is going to develop it. So now you get into a situation of choices. And what is your belief system? So is your belief system to say, we don't want them to have this, so we better develop it first, even though we're going to end up at the same?
Like an arms race.
Yeah, an arms race. Or are you better off to go back to your core belief and saying, probably going to get there somehow anyways, and we're better off trying to make people aware of what's going on? And so do I think there's some good people that would be saying, hey, we're trying to protect you? Sure, I get that. And, we get throughout the Bible, not necessarily what Jesus said on the topic, but we get a lot of examples of people being raised up, particularly in Israel. Otherwise, evil would just take over, right? But we're now at an existential technology level. Where do we apply the same sort of standard as we did in the past to what's happening now? I think we have to understand that this technology is going to be developed, and whoever's got control of that is going to be evil anyways. So is Elon a polytheist? I don't know that. He's dressed up in ways that maybe I don't like, and some costumes. But he could be a white hat, or he could be literally a good guy. But he could be just a white hat too. So we have to be careful of those in power and judge them for what they do. My jury's still out, but I do not like the hive mind aspect. I do not like the AI. And his comments on the AI, even though he has done some really good comments about, this is like, kind of like revealing the demons type of thing, is, it is also got another aspect that's concerning. So he decided to create his own AI company to create good AI, because the Google AI was evil AI. His words, not my words. And that concerns me, that language. Now, I don't dispute that Google was up to no good, but I don't like that white hat, black hat analogy.
It almost seems too obvious, like he's playing it to get permission slip to do whatever he wants. Yeah. But you've taught me this, that like all of this is written. It's going to happen. Like sometimes I do struggle with knowing. We were even talking about Trump earlier. It's like, do these people know that they're advancing a system that has been prophesied as having to happen for the rise of the Antichrist, or do they not? Because sometimes with prophecy, you don't know. It might not even be willing.
Well, and it depends on the individual. Is Trump completely informed on end time prophecy? I don't know that. He says he's a Christian, but that doesn't mean he knows prophecy. So, but his terms aren't all that good at times either. And I'm thinking that he's not against the New World Order. He just wants a larger role for the U.S. But that plays into advancing the New World Order. The Golden Age is a polytheist term for the days of Noah. The Golden Age is the age of the first time of Atlantis,
which is prophesied to come back as the days of Noah cycle back.
Yeah, and Atlantis had 10 kings. That was the center of a universal religion. It was also trying to spread, and the center of technology for the antediluvian age. And that this is the new Atlantis that the polytheists talk about bringing about in the end time, which is akin to the 10 kings of Daniel and toes of Daniel 2. Daniel 7 also includes the horns. Daniel 8 has more information on that, and Revelation 12, 13, and 17. So we're going to have 10 empires in the end time running by 10 Antichrist-like beings, where one horn rises amongst them, between them, after it comes to power to become Antichrist. So, yeah, it's concerning when he's talking about reintroducing that new golden age. He may be hearkening back to the Gilded Age as a golden age, but it's the terminology that I find a bit disturbing.
The more precise someone's terminology is, the harder it is to say that they don't know. But yeah. I don't know if he's crossed that territory yet, because it's still like a bit vague as of now. But these 10 kings, these 10 things, isn't that already published research on like the globalist agenda?
Sure. They've divided the Club of Rome when it was created to get the New World Order moving faster, because they were unhappy with the pace. It was created in the late 60s, and they divided the world into 10 groups of nations.
Exactly.
Very similar to what the UN uses. So the Europeans have their model of how they would kind of like it to play out. Now, President Trump, and I'm not saying he's an antichrist, I'm not even saying he's going to be one of the 10 kings. He's not necessarily against this grouping. He just wants that bigger role. Xi out of China is saying the same thing.
Yeah.
And Putin is saying the same thing. They just don't want the bloodline vision out of Europe imposed on them. They want larger roles.
Which makes sense. Nobody wants anything from Europe imposed on them. Everything back comes out of Europe, bro.
Oh, no, dude.
Just kidding.
You had to go there.
We're going to be in London in 2 months. It's one of my favorite cities ever. But he was telling, it's Gary's fault. Gary was telling me before about the bloodlines. And I think it's the biggest cluster in
Europe. The bloodlines are all in Europe.
Yeah, they're all in Europe.
Really?
Well, not all of them. There's like East. What were you telling me? The Chinese president has an ancient bloodline on it. Putin believes it, but most of them are clustered in Europe.
Yeah. And so we need to understand that this is in place today. So when we look at the best example to understand the bloodlines, Europe, and maybe as you start to extend that around the world, let's look at World War I. This was an interfamily war. So the King of England and the King of Spain and the Kaiser in Germany and the Emperor of Austria and the Tsar in Moscow and all the Belgium, they're all cousins. They all intermarried to keep those bloodlines as ennobled and as pure as possible. And it was an interfamily squabble. We should understand the world behind the geopolitics of the rivalries of the bloodlines. And one of the ways that we don't get to the end time is their inability to work together at times from bloodlines, because there can only be one bloodline that's going to become Antichrist. So one bloodline in their belief system is going to rule the world. They all want to get there, but they want to be that bloodline.
Which is happening in America as well. I mean, it's not limited to Europe. That's not what he was saying. Even I think Nathan Reynolds was talking about, like, all these families are competing to build the perfect prototype who could be a vessel for that Antichrist spirit. It's happening over here. It's happening in China, no doubt. Russia, Europe. I mean, anywhere you want to go.
And I'm told they hold in Europe 3 Antichrists ready to go at any one time. One presumes from different bloodlines. But they do want to advance that. And why do they want to get there? They want the rendezvous with God. They want the end time war because they believe they're going to win. They have end time prophecy themselves. Not all of it's published for sure. We get a glimpse at some of it through people like Alice Bailey, who we talked about, but the most famous would be Nostradamus, who was Rosicrucian, and although opaque, because of all the allegory that's written into it for only adepts to understand, they have an end time scenario that they think that they win in.
That they channeled from some fallen angel or spirit or something?
Yeah, the fallen angels know since the resurrection, it's over.
Like Jesus went and told them.
Yeah, let me just come back to that in a second, because it's so important to sort of understand. And that in the meantime, since then, the fallen angels continue to tell their offspring, their descendants of their offspring, that they can still win. And they have to play this out. And there's a place for them in the future time when they renew the earth. So just as Mitra or Shiva destroy the earth as the destroyer god, it's also a renewal of the earth god, that it will renew out of the ashes. And these bloodlines are like the phoenix coming out of the ashes in that sort of inner workings. So they think they can win. So they want this end time. They just want to do it before the ordained time if they can. So now what's going on in 1 Peter 3 that you're referencing to? Well, Jesus was still in the grave, and he goes into Tartarus, as we would understand as hell. In this case, it should be more specific to Hades Sheol, where the pit prison is located in a place. There's 2 sections there. When there's a specific location in Hades and Sheol for the pit prison, the lake of fire is something different. Hell has been conflated with those 3 or 4 terms that it's associated with. should be translated a little bit better to understand some of the nuances. So Jesus, while he's still in the grave, because his spirit's not going to sleep, right? He's the Word of God. He's the Jehovah of the Elohim. He's there on a mission, and he's just died for the sins of the world. And through that is going to be the resurrection that's going to happen on the Sunday, and our ability to be resurrected. And if the angels had known about the resurrection, as it's talked about in 1 Corinthians, they wouldn't have had him crucified. So they didn't know. They thought they were winning the war by doing it. So now he goes down to the pit prison to talk to the spirits who did these sins in the time of Noah. And at this point, I generally say, and here's what I think he said. He's basically telling them that your war is officially over. We're going to play this out so all the names in the book of life can have that opportunity to choose God or not and leave their name or have it blotted out of the book of life. And that at the end of that, as the resolution to the angelic rebellion, all the fallen angels are going to go to the pit, not to the pit prison, but to the lake of fire, and Satan's going to go to the pit prison for a temporary stay again, because he hasn't been to the pit prison yet. But after 1,000 years, then he goes to the lake of fire after starting another rebellion at the end. Now, how do I get there that he's telling them this? One is, okay, it makes sense that might be what he's saying, and I generally say it's my kind of speculation, but there is more to it. So in Colossians 2:15, and as you read through to about verse 18 to 20, you're going to see the angelic beings being talked about on bookends here. So it has angelic beings, and he is making a spectacle of these beings in that passage. Now let's enter in Ephesians 4:8. Or 4:10, sorry. 4:8, sorry, I got it right. And it has to do where Paul is talking about the captivity of the captives, right? It's a very odd real term that's being used there. And he is going to be parading out these captives is what is going on there. So that is talking about 1 Peter 3. And that there's going to be a spectacle made of these beings. This is an official denunciation and sentencing, I think, that's going on here. Now, Paul in Ephesians 4 is quoting directly out of Psalm 68, where you get all the detail of this, and they're actually paraded out to Bashan. And this denunciation is happening. So it's important to understand what is going on there. And it then starts to make some sense that while he was still walking on the earth as Jesus before the crucifixion, he went to Mount Hermon in the Bashan region to the location of the Pan Temple and the gateway to Hades. And he announced to the world and to the gods there at their holy mountain that I am going to build my church going forward, and changes Peter's name from Saul to Peter, Simon to Peter, sorry, which means rock. Going to build it on this rock. Jesus is the rock, so it's more than one meaning. It's not just one, and it's at the rock of Sion, right? It's the mountain of Sion, and that he's going to build his church. And they don't even know how he's going to do it at this point, but he has made clear warning what he's about to do. And they go and still crucify him anyways, because they don't know what he's going to do. And so not all the angels are in the pit prison. Only the ones that did the worst of the crimes are in the pit prison from before the flood and just after the flood. So that hierarchy is still in place, which is now answers how Psalms is talking about the bulls of Bashan that are mocking Jesus on the cross.
Okay. I'm going to keep going, but let's pause. Make sure you don't have anything.
All I was going to say is I'm just on my producer hat. We're going through the roots of Freemasonry, the Royals. We're going through end times technology, how all that interplay goes together. where are you kind of going? I'm just genuinely kind of curious.
No idea.
No idea?
No.
Okay, so you're not going. You're done with Freemasonry.
Are you bored?
Nope.
Are you bored?
I'm not bored. I'm just trying to find a way to like tie this stuff together because I'm like, man, there's so many open loops still on the Freemasonry track that you just kind of like, we went 10 minutes and then just kept going. So I'm trying to figure out where we're going.
All right. Well, I have more questions about what you're talking about. Then we can go back to Freemasonry.
If you're actually interested in it, then great.
Well, now when you put it this way, okay, you have like Freemasonry and you're like, Jesus went to Sheol and publicly humiliated. I don't even care about Freemasonry anymore. So we can go back to Freemasonry, but they matter zero. Let's go back to Freemasonry for Jake. Then I'm going to take you back to this moment.
What?
Don't forget, Gary. Okay. So, back to Freemasonry. Is it the recruiting arm of this?
Yeah, it's the lowest level. So they're good point, because we didn't come back to the initial question on that. So they are still, to join Freemasonry, you have to be invited. You can't just join it. So they are always looking to bring genealogical descendants of lower genes and bloodlines back in. And so they're still inviting people to come back in. And the general sort of understanding is that you can worship any god, as long as you worship a god, and that this is going to be very good for business, for social interaction, for your career, all sorts of good things, do charities.
So they allow you to worship like Jehovah or Yahweh?
You can worship any god you want.
They don't care?
Really?
They don't care.
Okay, got it.
Probably in North America, they would prefer if it's a Christian god, because it's easier to hide in plain sight. But that's the only qualification, because they're going to convert whoever they are by first level adept over to worshiping the great architect of the universe, Hail El, Satan, whatever you want to call him.
And the first level of the adept is 32nd degree?
No, that is third degree on the York Rite, which is the old system. And Scottish Rite is 33rd degree as an adept. If you're 32nd in Scottish Rite, you know nothing of importance. So you still think it's still a good organization, although you might be starting to say, we're some studying and learning some pretty weird things here. It's preparation, but first level of adept is said to overturn every preconceived conclusion you ever had. So these are mundane until they become adept. They are just like us. They deserve to be lied to. And so, but at adept level, that's where you start to swear those oaths to secrecy in ways that are now meaningful and instituted, not only on the secrets, but your loyalty.
And you're saying I've heard a lot of things from different people, like there's 200 levels, there's 100 levels. How many levels are there?
Depending on how you want to split it up. And if you're outside the craft, and if you are even at the low levels, you may not know. And I'm not going to profess to say that I know, because I'm not there. What we do know is that you have this multiplier of 3 kind of going on from 11 to 33 to get there, and 2 special numbers. So 3 times 11, 3 is the number of first level adept in the old system. So there's a relationship there in the 2 systems. So, if you have, how many times can you multiply 33 times 11? You could go that high, or times 3 again to 99. So depending on how they want to split up those steps, because every 11 degrees is one of the degrees of the first 3, right? So that's how you're splitting it up. Mm-hmm. So depending on your counting is how many that there are. I can't confirm how many there are. I've been told, I know there's 7 for sure. I know second level is like a regional manager of the lodges. You're going to be at least 7th level to be Rosicrucian. And then it starts to go higher. I've been told 9, 11, 33 on the old system. But it could even be more. But only the purebloods are going to be initiated at that level. Now, as a pureblood, you are initiated from childhood. So you are an adept before you are an adult. And that you can't take the adept title before between 25 and 30, which is not unusual because even in the Bible, between 20 and 40, you become an adult. It's kind of a standard within that. And so you'll hear a 32nd degree used in a couple of different ways. One is 32nd degree, not an adept in the Scottish Rite. 32nd degree, and I was on a show one time at the end of the show, and I knew there was a lot up going on when I was going on it, but it was a really good show. And they said at the end, he says, well, what would you say if you were talking to a 32nd degree adept at this point in time? And I said, well, you're either not an adept because you're 32nd degree of the 33rd degree, or you're a pureblood. He says, well, how do you know that? I said, well, I think you're confirming it, and I've had it confirmed elsewhere as well, that you can't take I said, you're younger than 25, likely, is my understanding, and you would know more than me, and that you can't claim your adept title yet. And he was absolutely astounded that I knew this. And as I said, I did have it confirmed before that, but he really confirmed it. And then he actually, after the show, he says, we should do another show. But then he got absolutely obliterated by whoever he reports to. And he just sent me messages and all sorts of awful things that I cannot repeat, and was,
Wow.
and he would not published the show after that, and he loved the show before.
Wow.
And wouldn't do the second show. So we need to understand how that sort of works. If they say they're 32nd degree, distinguish the difference. And so this would be a term that's used for a pureblood who is past adepthood before they're 18. They're way beyond 3rd degree or 33 degree, way beyond.
Pure blood meaning they
Royale.
were, okay, so not just born into Freemasonry, but of a bloodline that signifies that they are of the necessary blood purity.
So now if you look at something just to sort of make this sort of visually understandable, you have a society that's at Oxford, similar to what goes on in the U.S., Oxford being like the Ivy League type of thing of England, and a writing society called the Inkling Society that's sponsored by the Golden Dawn Rosicrucian Society. And you have people like Lewis and Tolkien there and many others, but just to keep it simple. And people will say, well, they couldn't be of secret societies because there's nothing published about them being part of secret societies. But in England, they don't publish, so you wouldn't have it anyways. But the tell is that you could not be part of a Rosicrucian society, which is way above Freemasonry, unless you were a pureblood. And you wouldn't be at Oxford in the 20s and 30s unless you're part of the nobility of royals. I mean, there may have been a couple breakthroughs, but not many. And so they were already adepts and easily able to be part of a Rosicrucian writing society. They were learned how to write, not to be fed the information, that they could create their narratives of their history, their belief system, and their genealogies. So that's kind of how that works. So one of the documents I get asked for all the time is show me the documents on Lewis, and also send me, and Tolkien, and also send me their bloodlines. I have 6-part series on that. One for the Llewellyn bloodline of the Lewis, and the other for the Tok bloodline of Tolkien that goes back to the Norse gods. So people want that. Plus, I'll show you their doctrines and the fruits of their works. And if they ever became Christian, they never recanted their writings. So I'll put all of that into the information. So understand that there's a level of knowledge and mysticism that's under play that works in behind the scenes that we can't really imagine.
So I'm not allowed to watch Lord of the Rings anymore.
Or Narnia.
Well, you can, but understand what they're doing. I mean, they're great storytellers, but make sure you educate your children on what they're watching. And if you want to enjoy the story, I'm not telling people not to do it, but don't be brainwashed.
Yeah.
Don't fall for the incarnation of Aslan in another world. Don't think that fauns and satyr gods should be part of children's writings.
Yeah. We talked about that in the other episode of, what was it? Mithra, who be incarnated back. That Jesus doesn't do that. That is what Aslan does.
Exactly. He's like the Christ consciousness.
Man, C.S. Lewis, dude. Did he write that to confuse people?
No,
some of the like screw tape letters is like awesome.
Oh, I know. He's a fabulous writer. So is Tolkien. Walt Disney did the same thing with fairy tales and things. And people say, well, he's Freemason. No, he's higher. He's part of the entertainment part. It's got to be at least Rosicrucian.
Walt too?
Yeah.
Interesting. Just shooting all your favorite people in the head.
They are preparing us from
Keep going.
They prepare us from childhood, and the fairy tale concept goes back many years to accept things for when they're ready to reveal things, that we would accept that more easily, and they can tell us that they told us, we just didn't understand. Right? They hide everything in plain sight. Everything that they do reflects who they are and who they worship and their history, because that's how they honor their gods.
Yeah.
We just have to understand how they speak and what they do. So this fairy tale concept, both Tolkien and Lewis were talking about, is they kind of consider the Bible a fairy tale because they both said so. Well, a fairy tale is a very interesting narrative that's a fiction and has a eucatastrophe, which is their term, written into it, where the hero doesn't have to face the horrible end. It has a happily ever after ending, which again is part of the fairy tale concept. So when they say the Bible is like a fairy tale, they're saying Jesus didn't really die on the cross and was resurrected. That's the fairy tale part. To make it a happy ever after ending. So now you have to be a mystic, an adept to understand how the Bible is written, because it's all allegorical. But that makes sense from their perspective because they have the interpretive approach, not the literal approach.
Got it. Okay. Back to Freemasonry. So Jake is happy.
Thank you.
We're going to keep hitting this home. Are there Freemasons who get out of it? Or
a lot of lower level ones do until you become adept. Not so much afterwards. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, because it does. Just like some of the bloodlines can leave. But if you're adept and or a bloodline on leave, you could be in constant danger for the rest of your life. And so it's not looked upon fondly. But if you're a lower level one, well, they're just saying, well, you're still mundane and you're not worthy, right? They don't want you to leave, but it's easier to leave.
Got it.
When it comes to Freemasonry, I feel like that often gets associated with witchcraft. Like, what is that even accurate? Is there what's the problem with being in Freemasonry if it's all good at first?
Yeah, well, witchcraft, the craft that Freemasonry is called, it's the same belief system and same religion. Druidism is the polytheism that we understand the witches come from, which is just either a priest or priestess of the Druidic religion. So it's like the Magi. It's like the Brahmins. It's the same, just different terms for the same thing. And so many Freemasons are witches. Why? Because they're adepts. The high-end witches are the high-end priest adepts in the religion, and also an adept in the same religion. And this is the religion that's part of Gnosticism. They look at Druidism on equal with the Druid priests as with the ancient Brahmins, with the priests of Egypt, with the sophists in Greece, with the Magi in Mesopotamia. They look at that as all being the same religion. So Gnosticism is the religion that we get coming out of the Middle Ages, that begins in the time of Jesus and just before, a few centuries before, that is amalgamating religions back into the original religion, that later produces theosophy, the god of wisdom, Sophia, the mother goddess of Gnosticism, who created the 12 archons and is the word for wisdom in Greek. And so philosophy is the love of Sophia, the love of the goddess, the love of the knowledge. As they work things through in our language, Gnosticism produces theosophy, which produces New Age.
Okay. And then there was something you said you were going to ask. Do you want me to ask it with something? Or are you going to say something?
One other thing that mixes in, that you see the process. So the major religion in the time of Jesus in Rome is Mithraism, from Mithra, the great architect of the universe. That is a branch of the Zoroastrian religion of the Indo-Aryans, both in Persia and in the Indus Valley, where Mithra comes from. And so now you have that is also part of Gnosticism, as that comes through Mani adopting Zoroastrianism into his belief system, then as it comes downstream and inherited by Gnosticism. I track all of this in book 1 in different parts so that you can put all the pieces together. But it is a bringing together of all of the old religions. So they are fluent in Hinduism, and because it's the same home religion, and they'll use the same gods and references.
Got it. Go ahead.
So to reference, there was a question you asked off camera earlier that I'll ask and then add some more to it. So I know something Taylor was going to ask was, where are the Freemasons now? What's their involvement in society? And part of the reason I asked this question is last time you were in town, you actually were telling me off camera some of the things that Masons do in the main center part of the city and how it's integrated into societies. And I'm so curious on where they come from, their involvement in that, and why. Like, there's so much that I'm curious on, but let's start there.
Well, let's just sort of start first, and I'll work back to the second question. So Freemasons are still active today. They obviously have had a decrease in recruiting people with more people learn about things and hanging on to people, but they're still very active. There's still a lot of them. They're in charge of a specific agenda and branch organizations that branch into them. So their main focus is on the army and military, everything to do with that. That's why you see so much of Freemasonry within the Navy or the Army, and it has a long sort of history with that. And they're also involved in politics, right? And so they're very much involved in supplying first level of entries into politics. So those are their main sort of focuses that they're focusing on.
And what's the trade? What's in the Navy and the political side? What's the trade for them coming in?
Mostly information.
Got it.
The intelligence agencies, also politics, kind of controls the flow of information.
Yeah, they're controlling the low level politics. It has connections to the global side of it. But you have more the Illuminati with the Skull and Bones, which is the stepping stone to the CFR and all the sort of globalist organizations that extend out of that. But that's now at a higher level, with the Illuminati wanting to also destroy Christianity. But the Illuminati works within the center of Freemasonry, so there's a close association there in terms of the geopolitics. So that's why most of the Masons, or most of the presidents, have been Masons, right? Freemasons, as you take that back into history. Yeah. So, and the Bohemian Grove gives the permission to who's going to become president because of the worldwide implication, and that's controlled by the Illuminati as a branch organization that goes into there. So you're going to see Freemasonry working at a lot of lower level initiatory organizations where they have their people in. It could be like the Elks Club or the Lions Club, things like that of lower levels. And they're always looking for those recruits, right, to bring them in as part of what they do. So they're quite active on that sort of aspect. Now, as the New World is being settled, and understand that this is the Templar dream from which all the modern organizations become an organization as a consequence of a central organization that was too large and powerful going down all at once. So now they have a more of a decentralized approach. So you're going to create banking organizations. You're going to, like with the Rothschilds, you're going to have Illuminati, you're going to have Freemasons, you're going to have the Rosicrucians, and just sort of split it up. So as the Templar dream was written down in their secret constitution, is they wanted to do two things. One is they wanted to create the new Babylon within the Roman Church, which the Jesuits took over, and now become on the cutting edge of New World exploration as well. Probably can't get there today with all of this, but the Templar dream is to explore the New World and to set up the new Atlantis, or the platform for world government through this island continent that they discover. And they get there even before. So Oak Island is traveled to by the Sinclairs even before Columbus discovers North America. And Columbus sails on the Santa Maria. If my memory serves me correctly on this, the flag of the Templars, because he receives his information on how to get to North America from the Templars who were already there. And the Templars aren't just disappeared by that time. They have other organizations that will continue in Portugal and in Spain, just under a different name. So anyways, this is retaken up with the exploration, this dream to colonize North America and South America. And all to get to this great end time where we have this universal religion and one Messiah running things. So as the migrations happen, you have not the first son of royals and high-level bloodlines migrate or immigrate across on these migrations, but say third siblings or second or number of them, and they are leading the setting up of new towns. They're there to set up their legal claim to the new continent as they go. And for every town that they go to, they set up a town square. Everybody knows that term. Well, in the old town square, and you'll see this not written on, but seen in a Masonic temple, a window is put into 4 quadrants. Now that can mean 4 different things, many different things, but in this case, you have the same thing being set up in a town square. You can basically do 2 accesses. And on the north and south end, they will put up a legal building. It could be a courthouse. It could be a police station. It could be a fire station. It could be anything that represents a legal for the north-south axis. And then on the east-west axis, they are going to set up a Catholic church and a Protestant church as the general MO that they control. And within that, make their claim for the legal rights of that town, because everything's done through legalism and the legalism that they impose on the world. And so they want to be able to exert that on every government and new town and township and reassign it to within the hierarchy as they branch out. And so I didn't believe it when I first heard it. So I checked out my own hometown. Boom.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So, and where I grew up, I won't say where I grew up, but there's a firehouse right on the river on the north. There's a courthouse on the south on top of the hill. There's a Roman Catholic church on the west and a St. Paul's Protestant church on the east. And then I checked out some more towns. And where I first came across it was I was down doing a show and a weekend show, and they had their members there, and they took us out on a tour to a site of a town of witches, and an old town in Florida. And they said, we're going to go there and we're going to do some certain things. And it was really kind of spooky and stuff. But then we went and we looked at the mapping out. Included where there was either, I think it was an oak tree that was cut down there, that it was close to a water site where they would use that as an altar for their sacrifices. So look for a water source as well with the town square, and they would build tunnels underneath to do all sorts of secret meetings and things like that. So I like to have control of the town center, and the Masonic Hall is always, for the most part, in the town square.
Yeah, an interesting study. You should do this. Is go research the plats of major cities.
The plats.
New York, Boston.
PLAT.
Yeah. It's crazy.
It's crazy.
Like the history of the plat is just like how a city is organized and kind of run.
Yep.
And so to see them develop, why they're developed that way, it's awesome. And some of it means nothing until you learn other things and you're like, oh, that was all in the plat. Like when the city was developed, they developed it a certain way. So, Jake, are you good with Freemasonry, bro?
Good as in like, do I want to join?
No, like... I can't tell if you're asking for the audience.
No, I'm good.
Or
no,
like,
those are the questions that I had around it that I really wanted answered.
If you're a Freemason, want to get out, emo Gary, or what do you do?
Well, let's make clear, I never came out of Freemasonry. I never went in.
Yeah, okay.
Even though you are often frequently accused of being in
exactly.
it.
So
because your hand signals, everything.
Let's be clear on that.
Yeah.
So
this right here, if you're like, Taylor's a Freemason. No, I'm not.
Yes, difficult to get out once you've sworn those oaths.
There are people that can help. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and let us also note that in the Bible we get a story that tells us a little bit about this.
Where?
And so with Moses. So when Moses dies, just before they cross the Jordan River, in the book of Jude, we have Satan showing up to claim his body.
Mm-hmm.
That's because he is initiated at Heliopolis. He is an adept before he becomes adult. He does swear all of these oaths, but he's there for God's purpose, right? He's going to be able to talk their language when he comes back, and he fully converts, and he can trump that, so to speak, if he wants to. And of course he does. So when he dies, Satan shows up with his legal claim. But God sends Michael and says, he was here for our holy purposes.
I have never made that connection before.
Me neither. It's amazing though.
Yeah. Otherwise, why would Satan think he could claim him?
That's amazing, actually. Okay, boom. We're done with Freemasonry. Nobody cares anymore. Moving on.
You don't care anymore.
Let's talk about Jesus and just talk about Jesus for a second. So this is one of the coolest stories I've ever heard you tell. Jesus, while he's in the grave, his spirit doesn't go to sleep. He goes to Sheol, basically pronounces judgment. They're a bunch of liars, so all they do is lie. They lie to their offspring lie to the societies, and so they genuinely believe that they can win in the end times. That's the story so far, correct?
Correct.
Question. When it comes to end times, there's a lot of timelines and chronology that I don't understand because I haven't studied it. But you said a couple things. For instance, Hell goes to the pit for 1,000 years, then comes back. This is post-tribulation, correct? Like post-trib, pre-trib. Can we just unpack that for a second? I have no idea.
So there's a lot of different approaches on eschatology, and all of them disagree. All of them say they base it on the Bible, and to a certain degree they do, but they all can't be right. So when you hear the word pre-trib, all that means is when they say that is that Jesus coming for rapture in his first days of his visitation, as Hosea 9:7 talks about, in the days of the Son of Man, Luke 17:22 and 26 says it twice, the days of the Son of Man, that people are going to be longing for in the end time. The first day he comes back is for rapture, after the first fruits resurrection, as 1 Corinthians 15:20 to 24 talks about. Rapture part for who he comes for is in 1 Corinthians 15:50 to 54. So pre-trib means before the start of the last 7 years. So the last 7 years isn't necessarily the tribulation, as people call it, but you get 7 years from Daniel 9:27, which is the last week of years, the last 7 years. That's reserved for the end, as in Daniel 26, Hebrew word ketz, meaning the last days, the end time, which gives you the context. And you get these last 7 years when all vision, prophecy, King of Righteousness is introduced. All things of those are completed in those last 7 years. And in the middle of those last 7 years is the abomination and the crowning of Antichrist. So pre-trib, in that view, has Jesus coming before the start of the last 7 years so that Christians don't face tribulation. If you're mid-trib, that means somewhere after the abomination, but before Armageddon, because there's different views as to the timing in there when Jesus comes back for rapture. If you're post-trib, that means Jesus comes back after the millennia starts at some point in time.
The millennia being when Satan is in the pit.
Yeah, when after Satan is sent to the pit prison for 1,000 years, Jesus reigns for 1,000 years, and then Satan is released. So those are kind of the general sort of terms when it comes to rapture. Now, there are other different approaches like preterism and other different ones that have interesting.
Those are the ones that are like saying that we're already in the end times, or it's already happened.
Yeah, or we're in the little season, and there's different. There must be 15 different versions of preterism, so it's hard to keep up with it all. And so people always ask me, is what form of eschatology do you follow? And I'm going, well, really, none of those. I'm a contrarian. What would you? Yeah. Because what they do, what you want to be careful of is that you are not reimagining what Scripture says. You don't want to bend it like a pretzel to arrive at a preconceived conclusion. And if you can't deal with inconvenient passages, that's a red flag. Mm-hmm. So everything sort of has to fit. And in those approaches, they break all of the rules that I like to live by. Those are just two of them, but there can't be any conflicts. So if you go to the outside approaches, then it's very hard to learn, and you have to accept at face value what they're saying. So if I'm in a group that's pre-trib, for example, and I give them some challenging passages, they can't answer the passages. But they can say horrific things, and I have no understanding, and that they have been told by the Word of God that this is the way it's going to be. And I say, where's the Scripture? And they can't show me. So you want to be careful with prophecy, but we need to understand it, and it ought not to be complicated, and it really isn't. And I don't believe I'm a prophet. I don't believe I'm a disciple. I don't believe I'm an apostle. I am a researcher, so I like things to kind of make sense. And what makes sense to me is that I should be able to listen to what the Redeemer tells me at face value. So why would I try and redefine what Jesus said by what a prophet says? You define what the prophet says, who is the supplier as the word of God, maybe perhaps through the Holy Spirit, but he's still the word of God. You would define what the prophet is saying by what Jesus said. But everything around Jesus, not vice versa.
Yeah, correct.
And of course, some people say that they do. But then they say, well, but you can't get a chronology from what Jesus talks about in Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 17, and 21. And I'm going, well, why would you say that? Well, because they have to say that because it doesn't fit their chronology or their pattern or their preconceived conclusion. So how do we know it's topical or chronological? Well, Jesus told us. That's probably the simplest way to state it. And he says, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. So what's the Greek word? Let's just verify that. Well, it is the when. It's no mistranslation. It's the when. It's a sequence of events. And that's the Greek word tota. So you can look it up. You can take it back. This is in a chronological order. What's the other verification? Is he puts the abomination in the middle of his oration in Matthew 24, and then tells us to inquire about the book of Daniel. So what do you think we should do?
Inquire about the book of Daniel.
Yeah, and put all of that around what Jesus said. Now, there's a step I would do before that, before you go to Daniel, is take the accounting of Matthew 24 as your template, and then put all the additional details that Mark would have and what Luke has, and put that around what Jesus said in the Matthew template. So what happens when you do things like that is people can't tell you that there's no rapture in what Jesus said there, because Mark 13:27 has a little bit more information on there than Mark 24:30 to 31. And it's not just the sign coming and gathering the elect from the earth, but in Mark, it's gathering the elect from the earth to the uttermost parts of heaven. And then people might say, well, the elect is not the church. Well, except that the elect is used 23 times in the New Testament in Greek, eklektos, and it's defined as those saved through Christ. It's described as people who believe in Jesus. It's described as Christians in the definition, and it's used that way consistently throughout the New Testament. So you can't just say the elect is just Israel in a New Testament prophecy for the church. And they say, well, it wasn't for the church. Well, really? Well, he's talking to the disciples who are going to build the church. He's Alpha Omega. He's telling you words you need to know till he comes back again. Of course, it's going to be for the church as well. And I'm not saying that the elect doesn't come together at the supper of the Lamb either. I'm just saying, let's not reimagine what he said. It's pretty straightforward. So put all the additional details on. So, and it really helps out because there's some juicy, important extra details. And then you have a template. Then go to Daniel, like Jesus described. And then you're going to need Daniel 9. You're going to need Daniel 11 and 12 for sure to begin with, because you're going to get those 7 years. That's going to begin with the sorrows, or just after the sorrows and into the time of the afflicted and the offended, which is very opaque language. Afflicted is Greek thlipsis, which is also translated as tribulation. Scandalizo is apostasy, a falling away and enticed into sin, lines up with falling away and apostasia in 2 Thessalonians 2, but the falling away before the gathering and before Antichrist is revealed. And so if we look at those timing of the last 7 years at that point in time, now we have the exact midpoint with the abomination and Jesus' sign, and the rapture is basically saying, when you look at the chronology, it's second half sometime. We don't get a date there, but we have a template. And you have something to look forward to with the first 3.5 years, that we're going to need to see this covenant, and we're going to need also in parallel sacrifices beginning on an overspreading or an extension or a wing of the temple for the Jewish people as part of this covenant, right? And then he breaks that and then sets himself up. Daniel 11 gives us the sequence of events starting on 11, let's say verse 20 through verse 30, up to the abomination on his rise to power that Daniel 2 and 7 are talking about, and 8. Right? So now we have the exact events for the first 3.5 and then the events for the last 3.5. And in the end, Ketz again, that's going to be used there, and a whole bunch of other terms I won't go into, but just as one example, when you get to the end time in terms of the Armageddon, that's the end time in the last 3.5 years as the completion of, you get an understanding that this will have relevance for other events talked about in other passages in the Old Testament and the New Testament. So you've put those events, and now we can go to Revelation. You might even want to go and put other New Testament prophecies on first and match those up, but it might be a little bit more difficult at this point. And I would recommend Revelation at this point because we want to remember two things. One is do not change anything in Revelation. Right? We're told not to do that.
Don't add, don't take away.
Yeah, exactly. So we want to be careful. That's why I don't start there, because I want to put it on Jesus's template. So the second thing is the revelation that John has is very interesting because it comes from Jesus, who is the spirit of prophecy, Revelation 20 or 19, I'm sorry. And it's the testimony of Jesus Christ given to the angel to show John. Okay? It has to fit what he said before. It just has to. So now all you have to do with Revelation is say, Revelation 1 through 5 is a very interesting part of the vision, and I call it a dual prophecy. I won't get into that in too much detail, but it has information from prehistory, time of the prophet, in this case, John, and end time implications. And this has all of it throughout Revelation. So you have, if you separate that out and then look at the churches and understand that John wasn't raptured because he was taken in spirit, Revelation 4:1. There's no rapture. There's no new body. There's no immortality. He has to return. He has to deliver the letters to the churches. Then he dies. There's no rapture here. People will say it's there. There's nothing that refers to it. They just have to make that change to make their timetable work. But it doesn't say that. And you can't even make the connection there without reimagining what it says. So now if you look at Revelation 6 with the seal openings as to being the start of the last 7 years, maybe just before or just after, it starts to make some sense. But there are also some unfulfilled prophecies that didn't get fulfilled in the time of John or shortly after in the age of the churches. And so those ones will be fulfilled in the end time. They each have at least one. One of them is 10 days of tribulation in Revelation 2:10, not 7 years of tribulation. That's the word thlipses again. And the other one is 3:10, that we're going to be saved from the hour of trial. Those were not fulfilled in the time of the seven churches. So they're, as part of the dual prophecy sort of operational process, the MO is going to be fulfilled in the end time. So we have two promises: to be saved from the wrath and be saved from the hour of trial. So now if you look at Revelation 6 sort of going forward, start that at the start of the last 7 years. Okay? And then as you're looking at Revelation, understand that you're going to see some throne scenes, right? Throne scenes not presuppose, but project what's about to happen on earth next. Okay, so it shows you what's going on in heaven, and they're at a start of a sequence of events that are going to come through the use of the word kahi, which is the term that's used in Revelation for the then, as you take that back to the Greek. And so they come in rapid sort of events, and this happens, and this happens, and this happens in chronology. So take Revelation 6 through Revelation 14:9 with the preaching of the gospel by the angel, which is the last of the preaching of the gospel that Jesus is talking about just before the abomination, line that up with the first 3.5 years. Okay? And things will start to make some sense. And you get a summary in Revelation 14 of the major events after the preaching of the gospel in sequential order for how they're going to happen after the start of the last 7 years after the abomination. What are those? Well, Babylon is destroyed first. That's rather interesting because it's destroyed in an hour. Where do we get that term? The hour of trial. What's that Greek word? Hora. Keep that in mind. So now you have this hour that Babylon is going to be destroyed, followed immediately by the implementation of the mark. Okay, that's the trial because it happens immediately after. And we're also told in Revelation 18, we get the destruction of Babylon to come out of Babylon, the last warning. Just as you have the angel preaching the last of the gospel. I won't go through all the people that do it between 144,000 and the two witnesses and the saints before that, but understand that that's what's going on here. And then you have the Armageddon event that happens after that. Okay, so the major events of the last 3.5 years. And then we get the details and the appropriate throne settings as well that predate the list of events that are going to happen in 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. Armageddon is Revelation 19. Revelation 20 starts the millennium. So now you can put those set of events right around what Jesus is saying. And what else is he saying at the end of Matthew? At the beginning of Matthew, just before the abomination, is that not only is the last of the gospel to be preached before the abomination, but also prepare for the end, right? As we talked about the end being the last 7 years, but also the end as it's talked about that is going to come along once the church is taken out, that is no longer tribulation, which will now move into wrath. People confuse and conflate wrath and tribulation. Tribulation is thlipses, and it can be translated as affliction as it is in Matthew 24:9. And we see that in Matthew 24:21 with tribulation, the great tribulation not seen since creation or the beginning. The parallel passage in Mark, which is why you want to put this additional detail on, has exact almost same wording, except that it doesn't say tribulation, it says affliction, just as you have afflicted in Matthew 24:7 for a tribulation. This is the great tribulation. Difference is the great tribulation of the saints, the great tribulation of the world. And the tribulation that's shown in Revelation 2:10 is for 10 years. So look for the tribulation of the saints to start 3 years before the last 7 years, but extend through the last 3.5 years as the Great Tribulation. And that we are told in the New Testament that we will go through tribulation. But the wrath is reserved for the ungodly. So we need to understand the difference between the two, and then how all of the passages start to line up into place. So when you go into 1 Corinthians 15:20, for example, now, you have the resurrection sequence. You have to know the resurrection sequence if you want to know what's going on. It's Christ, the first fruits, and then after, when he comes, those who died in him, as you move into 1550 to 54, and those still alive. The difference is the first fruits are martyred. So when we look at the 24 elders that are showing up, those are probably elders as martyrs. The 144,000 will be martyred as first fruits, and they're called first fruits just before the angel preaches, and they're seen back in heaven. That's the end of their commission. The two witnesses preach for 3.5 years and are killed and are resurrected. And they're killed in that hour. Hora again, at the towards the midpoint. So there's this hour that the 10 kings will hand over their power to Antichrist in Revelation 17 to destroy Babylon. it's the same hour. What does Jesus say in all of the Gospels when he's going to come back? There's an hour. It's unknown, but there is an hour. You don't know the exact hour or day, but you know the events that are going to be centered around it. So things just sort of line up if you allow it. So you can easily put all of those New Testament prophecies, Revelation, rapture prophecies, any other prophecy, and any Old Testament prophecy now around it. But you cannot confuse prophecies for the church with the prophecies for Israel and Judah. If in the Old Testament it is addressed to Judah, that's for the southern kingdom. If it's addressed for Israel, that's the northern kingdom. If it's addressed to a specific tribe, that's for the tribe. They're going to have their resurrection in the last 3.5 years yet. But after Jesus comes, you have those who aren't raptured for the Christians, and they're going to be beheaded. People say they're not resurrected till Revelation 20.4. It certainly mentions them, but when do we get a reference for the resurrection? Revelation 15, they're shown in heaven, right? And they're shown in heaven before the bowl wraths are poured out into the year of the Lord's wrath. They are not even there for the year of the Lord's wrath. One of the promises that we were promised in the trial, that we're going to be saved from that hour for the first part of the rapture and resurrections and the first fruits before that. So now when we look at Revelation 6, at the beginning of the last 7 years, you see all of these saints that have been martyred for the testimony of Jesus since Jesus came. These are first fruits. And they're told to wait a little season for those to come out of the tribulation of the saints. And they'll die for that testimony as well. They're all part of the first fruits. First fruits, 24 elders, Revelation 6, Revelation 7, 2 witnesses, 144,000. Those are the first fruits. After that, Jesus comes.
Got it.
Everything just sort of starts to fit.
And so it sounds like not everyone's going to be raptured.
No, obviously there's people who are weak in the faith. But what happens if you understand the falling away in 2 Thessalonians 2 and the scandalizo, which means the same thing, in the time of this tribulation, that both Mark and Luke say we're going to be killed in, we're going to provide that testimony for Jesus. It has to be the Revelation 7 saints. Like it just sort of has to be, and it fits on the timetable. And so if you look at how that all sort of fits into the chronology, it just sort of flows. So there's going to be tribulation, and it's not going to be easy. Nobody should want to go through this. This is going to be very, very difficult, but you won't have to ever worry about another conflict again. And when I first started to do this, I used to live in fear that I would find a passage I couldn't make work. And then when you start to get into the Old Testament passages, it can be a real challenge. But if you understand the year of the Lord's favor is a separate year from the year of the Lord's wrath, and you can now fit the bowl wraths forward as the year of the Lord's wrath, it starts to make some sense. So what's going on with the year of the Lord's favor? That's in the time of Jacob's trouble. And then also looking at Daniel 12, you have this resurrection of people that Daniel is addressing his people to. Well, you have, and this is, by the way, all part of the first resurrection. The first resurrection is a sequence of events. It's all part of the first resurrection of those who are Jesus. It just happens in different stages. So the time of Jacob's trouble is the time of the second Exodus that Jacob is saved from. Trouble is the Hebrew word sarah. It means exactly the same thing as tribulation or thlipses says. It is the source word and the defining word for thlipses. Is the cognate word in Greek for sarah. So it's the time of Jacob's persecution. It's the time of their trouble. And it's in the last 3.5 years in the Great Tribulation. And it is after the rapture event. And when you go now to Daniel 12, it has this time of trouble. That's the Hebrew word sarah. This is for Daniel's people, a time of resurrection, some resurrected to eternal life and some to the second death. I infer the second death, but to death. And this is for his people. It's in the same period, but it's not. People will say, well, that's a Christian one, because how could it be anything else at that point in time, right? Well, but that's mid-trib. That's after the abomination again. But it's sometime afterwards. So the time of Jacob's trouble is the time of second Exodus. We get this also in the book of Isaiah and the book of Luke as the year of the Lord's favor, when Jesus is going to lead the second Exodus. After his sign comes for rapture, Israel, who is awakened as the lost tribes, and Judah, who is the one that is still, as we understand them, visible today, and have accepted Antichrist as their Messiah, and began with that the sacrifices on a wing of a temple, they realize with the sign and the abomination that they've made a great mistake. So they're going to convert back to Jesus as their Messiah. They're now ready for this year of reconciliation, followed by the year of recompense, which is, again, a vengeance for Israel and the saints, for the wrath of God that comes for those who are ungodly. So now you have sometime in the last 3.5 years, you have Jesus coming first for a rapture, and those who died in the resurrection. You have the resurrection of the saints before the wrath as well, who are beheaded. You have, before the year of the Lord's wrath, the resurrection of Israel and the reconciliation, all in time for the bride, as both being the bride, back to the one covenant, in time for the supper of the Lamb in Armageddon.
When you say resurrection, are these physical resurrections, like people literally coming back?
Well, yeah, so Ezekiel 37 is the passage you go to for the parallel passage here. And that's the dry bones one that everybody says, what the heck is this? Some people say zombies to you name it. Well, this is the resurrection of Israel. This is the time, as you get further into the teens in that passage, the time of second Exodus, where Jesus is, as he's talked about in Micah 5 and Micah 2, he's the breaker who's going to break Israel out of prisons, who have awakened and are in prisons all around the world, who have converted because of the 144,000 who are waiting to be broken out for second Exodus. And this is the time of the seven shepherds. And this is the time the Assyrian is dealt with on the mountains. And so he comes for not only the resurrection and judgment of Israel, but their second Exodus. And Judah, who escapes Jerusalem after the abomination, as the three Gospels talk about, is also talked about in Revelation 12 at the midpoint, where they're going to be protected in the wilderness for 3.5 years at the midpoint. And this is where the Exodus will come from all around the world to meet them in the wilderness. And then, as Ezekiel 37 talks about, one staff, they're going to be joined. So everything is in place in terms of that resurrection. So yes, that is a physical resurrection into a new body. And that's the descriptions you get with the dry bones coming back together.
Got it. To preach the gospel, essentially. Did you get all that?
I mean, it's going to take 3 years to process, but yeah.
Can you just make us a graph of timelines?
I do happen to have this recorded, so I'll get to watch it back at 0.5.
Sounds like basically a lot of us are going to die, and then it'll be really good. Right? That's basically it.
Well, we know how it ends.
Yeah, it's more complicated than that.
Yeah.
And, you know, the differences in, for most of the views is that it's how much tribulation do we go through, if anything. We know there's a rapture.
Yeah.
It's really the timing, so we shouldn't make that a faith issue. That's shouldn't raise it to that level. I think it might be a tragedy if we get it wrong and it comes later than what we think, as in pre-trib, that we lose all of our credibility when the world needs us the most.
Well,
So that's something to keep in mind as well. But yeah, but there's these other ones where they talk about the little season that we're in that right now. That's very poor use of scripture, and they say we're in the period where Satan has been released, and this could be 100 years, it could be 200 years, it could be 1,000 years. It's different. I don't know if you've heard this Tartarian.
What do you mean released?
Released from the pit prison, which he is at the end of the millennium.
But he hasn't even got in yet.
Well, they say he has, and we're at the end of that millennium. We just don't know it. We're in this little season, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because they also say Jesus has gone back to heaven because they have to change the scripture. We don't get scripture for that. And in fact, in a short period of time, he gathers an army and he goes to war against Jesus in Jerusalem. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But how they do that is they say little season can be taken back to Greek, and it could mean just a period of time, an unknown period of time. Season can, absolutely, but not little. It is micros chronos. And we get one other example of micros chronos, and that's in Revelation 6, micro chronos, little season, that those are told in Revelation 6 to wait a little season longer, so that those who are to die for the testimony of Jesus like they will are going to come out of the great tribulation of the saints versus the tribulation of the world. And so micros chronos, we get one time frame, right? So we shouldn't really expand it more than what it says and a parallel application. But the Bible is more judicious than to leave that open for speculation. So in Matthew and Acts and other places, you're going to get long season when it's a longer season. Hekanos, chronos. So it specifies when it's a longer period, and a shorter period. So you have to stretch it out of its proportions and application to make it fit. Yes.
Yeah. You said you don't want to live through it.
No.
Do you think you will?
Probably.
We're that close.
We're certainly in the fig tree generation, and I think we're in the age of the sorrows. But the sorrows get stronger throughout that generation, and we don't know what a generation is defined by. Definitely. And we don't know what the timetable definitely is for the start. I can make some deductions. First thing is we're told a generation can be 40 years as a 40 years in the wilderness in the time of Exodus, 70 years in the book of Psalms, 120 years in Genesis 6:3. So that's a fairly wide time frame. And then the next question is what would be the starting point?
Yeah, when did it start?
And why does Jesus use the fig tree as his analogy for the fig tree generation? Well, the fig tree is an allegory, prophetic allegory, that's used for the southern kingdom, Judah. The vine is used for the northern kingdom. And we see that used in the Old Testament. It starts in the book of Judges, but it goes throughout the Old Testament, Jeremiah, Isaiah, number of books. So without getting too detailed on it, it's the allegory. So the second thing that comes to mind is that Jesus, just before he's going to go into the temple and cause mayhem there to the Pharisees, and then caused real concern with the disciples. And before he gives the oratory, because of the concerns the disciples has, what he does, he goes to a fig tree to get some fruit.
Oh, this is before he curses it?
Yeah, it has no fruit.
Yeah.
So he curses it. Why does he do this? He's telling the disciples, who are the southern kingdom, part of the southern kingdom Jewish people, they know the allegory. They know the southern kingdom no longer is going to bear their fruit. And they're going to do the ultimate violation of denying their Christ, their Messiah, in not too long of a time. And so then he goes in to the temple, and then he gives the prophecy about the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. So the disciples are getting concerned. So they ask, can you give us more detail on this? What will be the signs of the end time and your coming? And that's when he provides it for them. And then he ends it with he ends it with the fig tree generation followed by the days of Noah allegory, and that the days of Noah, we probably talked about in previous shows how it's going to be like that, right? And why we need to learn about it. But the fig tree generation, he says, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. So all of these events that he lists are going to happen in one generation, right? And so that's when we need to understand the other allegory, which is the sorrows, which has the same catastrophes of pestilence, pandemic, earthquakes, and wars and rumors of wars that happens in the seal judgments, 25% destruction, of the trumpets at 33%, and the wrath bowls that would be 100%, unless Jesus steps in to prevent the world from being destroyed by fire. All flesh would be killed. He stops that just before that's going to happen. So the sorrows is the other overarching of the three that says that these catastrophes will get stronger and probably start working together as we go through this generation. But we're a ways away yet because we don't have the world government yet, and we don't have the universal religion yet.
I feel like we're closer to the universal world religion than we are the world government.
We'll start to know that that's getting closer when the false prophets come out. The false prophets will bring about, through their prophecies, Babylon. And we see that being set up a lot right now, whether it's in a polytheist religion or a monotheist religion with apparitions where people are being initiated, and they're going to come out at certain dates with prophecies of doom. Now, I look at the seal judgments and the trumpet judgments as things that we do to ourselves versus the wrath bowls, which is for the ungodly and punishment. Those aren't judgments. This is what we do to ourselves. And so these are contrived catastrophes as the people who run this world are trying to bring about the end time. It's going to increase as we go, and is going to be required to get to world government and a universal religion, but you're going to have the religion first, and it's going to control the 10 kings. It rides the beast of empires, reigns over them with the reins, and the 10 kings will hand their power over to Antichrist to destroy Babylon because they're jealous of Babylon. So once we understand the allegories, and that's all defined within the Bible, we start to understand how things start to come together. So to have Babylon come, you have to have prophecies of doom that they can control, to have the world convert their language in some of these false prophets, convert to the one true religion, or be destroyed from the face of the earth.
Do you think Babylon has any connotation or allegorical similarities to a nation currently on earth right now?
Not to a nation, but we know it's said to be a city 9 times in the book of Revelation. So we know that. So it's going to be at a city. And then the matter is what city. And we know it's going to be a universal religion because it's described as a mystery religion in Revelation 17, and an initiatory religion, as you understand, mysterion, the Greek word that's used there, and sits on many waters. So it's a universal religion of the world. We know it's going to be a geopolitical organization because it controls the 10 kings, and they grow jealous of that. And it's the glue that brings that whole network together. And we know it is an economic organization that controls all trade, right? So it's all of those aspects. So it's a beast religion, and it's all of these other enterprises. So it's going to sit on 7 hills in a city, but it's more the world, right? So the 7 hills, you could say, should be ancient hills. It's an ancient city. You could look at Constantinople, or you could look at Rome. I think Rome better fits. Rome was understood as the seat of idolatry in John's time. Their code word, just as we see Peter writing a letter that he's in Babylon, code for Rome, because if you said Rome and you said something bad about Rome, you'd suffer death. it's understood as an allegory for Rome. And so when you get to the definition of Babylon in the New Testament, it has all the other meanings, but also an allegory for Rome. So that sort of lines up. The seven hills are the seven hills of Romulus and Remus, right? And this is where the Sibylline prophecies were also located on Palatine Hill. Vaticanus is a branch hill that was part of the Sibylline prophecies. So now you start to see polytheism sort of, I'm mixing this in as a connection. It seems to fit that this is going to be maybe start in the Roman Church, but it's going to be more of a polytheist religion, and it's probably going to move its home from Vaticanus Hill to inside where the old city of the Seven Hills was located.
I have a lot of thoughts, but I'm not intelligent enough to share them. So next time you're here, I'm going to be studied.
I think the big point on that I would like to get across to people on prophecy is read for yourself. And if you're struggling with conflicts, you need to re-examine the approach, because you should be able to make everything sort of fit. So, and it does if you use Jesus' chronology, everything fits. And if you understand him as the Jehovah of the Elohim in the Old Testament, where it says Lord or Lord God, that's where he's involved. So now all of those end time prophecies where those terms are utilized, you know when he's coming back. What period?
And it'll be great. Even though it's scary at first. You might die, but it'll be better after.
Yeah, we have to go through this.
Yeah.
We have to go through this to get to where God wants us to be, and where all who have chosen him and all who are loyal will be moving on into eternity.
I don't. You'll know where this is, but in Revelation, it might be when it's talking about the saints. It says they didn't love their life so much that they were afraid of death.
Yeah.
And so I think I've just started talking about this where I'm just like, people have to get over the fear of death in all connotations. Because if you know what is really going to happen, you won't be fearful in the short term.
No. And you don't have to like it.
Yeah.
You don't have to like the process. But God gave us a gift of life to choose. And everybody has free choice. We're playing things out through free choice, but God as Alpha Omega, Jesus as Alpha Omega, is greater than free choice.
Yeah. I got what I needed from that.
Yeah, there's nothing to add to what Gary said, just something that I think of as I'm listening to this, because I know one of the things I see a lot amongst people who are, even just people who, not only Christians, but people who love to study eschatology, is like, sometimes that's all they do. Like, that's all they do. And then they end up getting into the either the poverty mindset of like, oh man, if it's going to end, then let's not do anything now. And I know that's not what we're thinking at the moment, but there's something that Mike said that really Mike Signorelli, he said, build as if Jesus is never coming back, and evangelize like he's coming back today. And that's always just kind of sat with me in terms of this view, and brings a lot of peace to a situation of like, yes, this is going to get crazy, and there's still a lot that we have to do now.
Yep. And understand we can't control things. We can only control what we do.
Right.
And that's what we can do, is we can prepare and always watch.
Mm-hmm.
Always watch. And that's what Jesus instructs us to do. So I know it sounds odd that you could just take the Redeemer's word for what he said. That's the way of the wisdom of the world today. But I think it is that simple. And when you get it down to that simplicity, you get out of the complexity of all of these different eschatological approaches that have to reinvent what Jesus said and have to leave out inconvenient passages. Just let it flow. It'll flow. Just all the pieces will fit together. And it should be that way. I mean, it's the meek that's to inherit the earth. Mm-hmm. It should be addressed to us, not the elite.
Yep. Agreed. 100%. Cool. You good?
I'm great.
You have any questions? Timeline predictions? 20 years? 30 years?
I refrain from timeline predictions, although you could speculate that things are heating up right now. But if it is the fig tree generation and you wanted a start point, you might look at Jerusalem being that start point and the taking of it in 1967 versus independence, because Jerusalem is like the epicenter of end time prophecy. And in the Southern Kingdom is in possession of it in the end time. So that would make sense to me. And if that is, then it could be 70 years within the 2030s, but things would have to happen very quickly.
They are speeding up.
They are speeding up, though.
Like pretty drastically. So, okay, cool. Thank you for coming.
You're quite welcome.
You're one of my favorite people. You blow my mind every time you talk. So send me that book tomorrow and I'll proof the third book for you. Like he's not going to do it.
No. I don't have the third book done yet, so I can't send it.
It's in your mind.
Yeah.
You have it in your mind.
I do.
All right. Thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions specifically around this stuff, we'll probably have him in town again here soon. Let us know. We'll keep track of them and
put them in the comments.
I will forward them to Dr. Gary.
Wonderful.
So,
let's go.
Cool. Love you guys. See ya.